All right. It is just a couple minutes. It's 5:32, I believe. Wanted to call this special meeting to order, starting with roll call.
Councilmember Alves,
Here.
Councilmember Hefty,
Here.
Councilmember Taylor,
Present.
Vice Mayor Haskell,
Here.
Mayor Wernicott.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. I believe I don't have the agenda right in front of me this second. We are going to start with a public comment at this moment. Yes.
We do have one hand raised on Zoom.
Okay, we do not have any hands. We don't have anybody in the schoolhouse, so we'll go to Zoom, and I believe there's one hand raised.
David Cardinal.
David
Hi.
Cardinal.
Thank you. I have a bit of a question slash comment. There are people asserting that no exit interviews have been done for any of the 24 or so employees who've left, and therefore that we don't know why they left, and it hasn't been said why they left. I totally get that individual HR records are, of course, totally private, but we've had an exodus. And I would first of all like to know, is it true that in the 2 years this town council's been serving that we have never done exit interview? I mean, or is that just all false? And then second, if we've been doing them, I would love to see some kind of output to what the turnover is about. I mean, it's been far from transparent. We've had more secret meetings than ever. And nobody that I know has really said, well, what's wrong or why? I mean, accountability would be a great thing. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other hands raised? Any other hands?
No other hands raised.
All right. With that, I am going to close oral communications. And we will now go into it's
I just want to clarify.
Okay.
I think that this was clear, but the agenda listed oral communications for items not on the agenda, which I think that was the comment that we just received. We do also take public comment on the closed session agenda items themselves. So did just want to provide the public with that opportunity. There are 2 items on tonight's closed session agenda. One regarding public employment, consider the qualifications of candidates for the position of interim town manager. And the second item is public employee performance evaluation at the periodic check-in with our current interim town manager.
okay. Is there any public item for this closed session or public comment rather, pardon me, for the closed session items just described by Catherine? Again, there is nobody in the schoolhouse,
No hands raised on Zoom.
no hands raised on Zoom. So no public comment on the closed session item. So I will close public comment on that as well. Though anybody on Zoom, if you could please leave the Zoom room as we're going into closed session at this time. We will open up the regular agenda meeting at 7 p.m. Thank you. So Christine, you'll start the recording. Technical difficulty transitioning the Zoom from the closed session to the special meeting. And so I just want to report out that there is no report out from the closed session. And then we will go right from there into oral communications. I have 3 speaker cards, so I'll start with those in the schoolhouse. The first is Linda Olson. Oh, this is not about the Hawthorns. No. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, this is, oh, that's Hawthorns also. I didn't realize that. Okay, none of these are on Hawthorns. I apologize. Or all of those were. Is there anybody in the schoolhouse that would like to speak on something not on the agenda? I don't see any hands raised. Moving over to Zoom. I do see one hand raised, Linda Brothers. This is for items that are not on the agenda.
Sorry, I must have hit the wrong button, but I don't have anything to say now.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so it appears that we do not have any oral communications for items that are not on the agenda. And so I'm going to close oral communications and move on to item 4A, consideration of appointing 7 members of the Ad Hoc Evaluation Committee to review potential sites for building affordable housing. And we have a subcommittee who is working on this of Vice Mayor Haskell and Councilmember Hupty.
Sorry, I think I'm not monitoring, but I'm not sure the public is getting in. I just want to make sure. Pardon?
Have they, tr-
But how about right now? Like they couldn't have 5 minutes.
which is the same technical difficulty we were all having. So if your hands rate, okay, so I'm going to move on to the additional hands raised on Zoom. The next one is Rita Comas.
Yes, to answer the question, people are having a problem getting in. It was showing that we were not allowed in, that the meeting was still closed, but people are sending emails around saying that they can't get in. So I really hope that if people have oral statements to make and they do get a chance to sign in, that they are then allowed, because it's hard for the residents to have a say. Thank you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we were transitioning from the closed session to the special meeting. And so for anybody who can hear me, I invite you to re-log in right now and you should be able to access. The next hand raised is David Cardinal.
Yeah, really quick comment. We were locked out, like you said, but I think everybody should be able to get in, has been since you started the meeting. So I don't see anything wrong, except people might have to try a couple times, might have had to try again to get in. So thanks.
Thank you, David. So yeah, any hands raised here in the schoolhouse for items not on the agenda? One more time. No hands raised. I also don't see any hands raised on Zoom. So I am going to now again close oral communications and move on to item 4A.
Okay. All right, so I'll start. Mary can add anything I miss. Mary and I were the subcommittee to select members of an ad hoc site evaluation committee that the town is putting together as part of its post-adoption plan for the housing element. And we went through a process of soliciting applicants who were required to answer a series of questions about their experience in town, volunteerism, familiarity with these housing issues. We were very pleased to see that there were 11 people in town who put their hand up to be interviewed, all of whom looked like very strong applicants and were very, very impressive in the interviews. The task was to appoint 4 members of the public to join the Planning Commission member and the ASCC member. After going through our process, we narrowed it down and we are recommending that the 4 resident members that are to be appointed would be Karen Askey, Nona Chiarello, Jocelyn Gray, and Carabatra. We are happy to answer any questions. The town council also needs to appoint a representative to be a member of the 7-member committee.
Questions from the council? No questions. No questions. All right.
No,
Yeah.
I'm good.
All right. No questions from well, actually, I do have one question. Did you guys consider any questions around financial viability and considering not just the land, but also the cost to develop when you were interviewing? Or is it was purely just about identifying parcels?
We were interviewing, none of that came up in the interview process. We were looking for individuals that might have different perspectives in town, if they own their house, if they are renting in town, if they've served on a number of committees, if they kept up with the housing element and the post-adoption plan. So we did not, we looked and asked people about their familiarity with the financial aspects, real estate, but you can imagine no one person brings everything to the table, and we weren't really looking for that. We were looking for a good mix of expertise and viewpoints.
All right, thank you. That was my only question. So opening this item up for oral communications, is anybody here in the schoolhouse like to make a comment on this agenda item? I don't see any hands raised. So I'm moving over to Zoom. Right now, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Is there anybody from the public on Zoom that would like to make a comment on this item 4A? I don't see any hands raised on Zoom, so I'll bring it back to the council for discussion.
Well, I'll
Who would
just
like
thank-
to start?
I will thank the subcommittee and thank the people, everyone who volunteered and the 4 who are agreeing to or being appointed. I'd be ready to make a motion. Well, I'll let others comment. But thank you for the work.
It was a pleasure. All good people came forward positively. I suppose, I think that's probably all I have for comments on that. If I had to ask a question, it's about alternates and about whether there could be substitution, whether there needs to be substitutions, or if there needed to be substitutions, how that would happen. Either for one of the representatives have alternates. The town council hasn't decided who will be representing them and when that will come forward within the process.
I just add, yeah, thanks. I think you guys did a great job, and I was really pleased to see the public response. I mean, the volunteerism in Portola Valley is still alive and well, so thank you.
I also want to echo the thanks to the subcommittee and the thanks to the community, because obviously this is, a spirited topic in town. And so really appreciate, especially for that reason as well. In terms of discussion, I just wanted to highlight one of my, obviously very supportive of the Sunrise. One of my ongoing concerns is identifying land, to me, is a fraction of the problem. I think the bigger problem is going to be financing. And so my concern is how do these smaller types of projects get financed? We know that affordable housing developers have said, you know, they pencil out to them at around 50 units. And so that would then assume that in these smaller developments, based on this approach, that they would not be interested. And so the question then becomes, you know, when it's $750,000 per unit and we have 50 units to make up, who is, you know, I still believe we need to figure out what the best practices are in terms of the financing. And my concern, you know, given limited time and resources, I would suggest, and this will be up to the new council, that this group is, includes an assessment of both of them at the same time, to go through a process when you're identifying land, but don't have any understanding of how it will actually, or not an understanding, but a plan for how they will get developed, will end up with an empty set, more or less. And so my suggestion is to add people with a finance background, or perhaps you guys might consider asking the finance committee if they would take this on as a subject, just a suggestion. But I feel like to just focus on the land without appreciating the complexity of what I think is more than half of the challenge will just not be as effective as it
Yeah.
could be.
For background, all fair points. Nothing gets developed unless it's affordable, to the town, to the developer, to someone. The process I envisioned was to bring the ad hoc committee up to speed with where Mary and I can transition the information we do have, which includes some sources of affordable housing resources. I would recommend that one of the first things the committee does is to try and set up a framework for analyzing the opportunities and identifying what are more and less likely, but serially honing in on the most viable pieces and telling the town and the town council when they need to tap that type of resource. It's not a bad idea at all, in my perspective, to get the finance committee involved, and that could be something that they decide to add to that process. I think there should be a component of that, so we don't get to an inviable option at the end. So I was deferring to that committee, the timing for that, because doing it too early might prevent them from getting, you know, off the ground and running with things. But certainly doing it too late is not going to be a good use of time. So I take the point. It's just that we weren't really trying to solve that necessarily.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to raise attention and awareness of the complexity, that it's really a two-pronged thing, and 50 units could easily be, based on that 750K, $35 million. So it's a really large challenge and should be considered as part of this whole process, which it sounds like you've got your eyes on that. So thank you.
And we were collecting the list of resources that we just happen to run across. And I would envision part of the task of the committee would be, are there additional financial resources or experience on the financial side out there that we should tap? I mean, we did bring forward opportunities to engage a particular financing vehicle that was just opportunistic. I think the next step would be a more thoughtful and comprehensive look into what financing options are out there and how do they work. Maybe having somebody come in and speak to them out of the gate about how to think about that and how to factor that into their process could work.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Because like, for instance, note here that I wanted to include. I mean, just as an example for awareness, the way an affordable housing developer would do it is if they become interested in a project, what they need to do is then go through a bidding process with the state. And the state would then decide, based on that bidding process, whether or not it is a fiscally efficient project. And So just, it's a very complicated process. So I just think there's a lot of education
Mhm.
that we need to have in the community sooner versus later. So,
And even in parallel with an ad hoc committee, I think educating the community on these things is a worthwhile endeavor anyway. So whether it's something that you task the ad hoc committee to do out of the gate, or whether we bring in resources to educate the community more generally, I think both should be on the table and factored in to a next process.
I had a question about what you just suggested. What arm of the state are we talking about? Who would they be?
so this is just the low-income affordable housing developers work to get funding from the state, not us directly,
Right?
right? And that's how that model works. So I think there's, all I'm pointing out is that there's a lot of education that needs to happen on this side of the topic instead, in addition to just focusing on the parcels.
Right, which we did in the process. So that will be handed over.
I
So-
think there's a lot, significantly, a lot of
Absolutely.
learning to do on the financing side of this. I don't think we've scratched the surface of
I agree.
so.
So for the agenda item, we're approving the 4 members and choosing a council representative. Did you have any thoughts on who would the council representative be?
I would think Mary is the right person to continue forward. She has all the background here, has done a lot of outreach, and can weigh in on what we've tried and why on a real-time basis. If she's willing.
And Mary's, you're willing?
Yeah, I'm willing. I was thinking that, yeah, I'm not sure how long I should stay on as whether there'd be somebody who'd be more qualified
Well-
later, but for the time being, I'm willing to accept.
It obviously can't be me or the mayor. So unless Craig was really itching to be on it, then I would be perfectly happy to nominate Mary and accept our 4, well, all the appointees that we now have. 6. Right, the other commissioner. I will move to accept the appointments and name Mary as the council representative to the ad hoc committee.
And I second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Alves?
Aye.
Alves? Councilmember Hefty?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Haskell?
Aye.
Mayor Warnkoff?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you again to the subcommittee, and thank you for continuing on it, Mary.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item 4B, consideration of options for selecting of a recruiting firm for the interim town manager. This also is the subcommittee of Judith and Councilmember Hefty.
Right. We, I think the memorandum summarizes what we did and how we did it. We basically spoke to, both of us spoke to 4 or 5 firms. We also looked at bulletin board options, like the non-recruiter version of recruiting process. Keep in mind, this is an interim town manager. We are not even trying to select a permanent town manager recruiting firm right now. We did ask each firm about its availability to undertake a permanent town manager role, but because that is a different price point, actually a different set of contacts that would be involved, it should be a separate process where we evaluate the permanent manager recruitment firm. We ended up looking at pricing and availability in the short term. And out of the folks that we spoke with in terms of recruiting firms, we put forward the Greg Larson proposal and the Baker Tilly proposal. And we also wanted to take advantage of information we just learned about in Mary's time, in particular at Cal Cities, a big conference that she went to. She was busy asking about alternate options, and we have some bulletin boards that are opportunities to post a position out there without recruiters involved, just in terms of being comprehensive and making things available to the council to consider. There were some differences, not huge in terms of pricing. And for interim town manager, very often, for the benefit of the public, very often these are annuitants. In other words, retired town managers. They are not typically looking to engage in a permanent town manager. They are going to be more keeping things running while we can do a fulsome and comprehensive search for a permanent town manager. So we welcome any questions and comments, but that's was our process and the reason for these recommendations.
Thank you for that overview and again for the work that went into bringing this forward. Any questions from the council? Jeff or Craig?
Yeah, just double checking. Baker Tilly is capable of doing the permanent search as well. I mean, Baker Tilly could continue on to the Pershing Street, but Greg Larson cannot.
It
Is
would
that
be,
right?
yes, Greg. Oh, sorry, Mary, do you want to go?
I think that's correct.
And for further comment, Greg offered if we were short-staffed and needed bandwidth, he could support identification of a permanent town manager recruitment firm. I'm not sure that that's something we need, but he did offer that, but not the permanent manager search. Baker Tilly, we spoke with someone who specializes in these interim positions. She's an ex-town manager herself, and she has a similar network. But Baker Tilly did have someone participate who could do and is more suited to do the permanent town manager. However, we didn't get into terms with them on that, and they weren't really stepping forward with what, if any, financial benefit there might be in using the same firm. So if you look at it, I think the major benefit would be there'd be an understanding gained if you were to select them during the interim manager process that could be handed off to someone internal to the same firm, but a different person at that same firm.
Thank you. I think that's all I have.
So I think my only comments, I'm comfortable with going to recruiter. I think trying to go the website route, given that there's some urgency to this. So, I mean, my recommendation is that we do go with a firm. And it seems like for me personally, it seemed like going with Baker Tilly seemed like a good.
We need to take public comment, I think, or are we in questions?
We were in
That was,
questions.
you're right, and I
We're in
apologize. I've
questions.
sort of,
Yeah.
Yes,
I
that was
appreciate
it.
the efficiency,
I'm
but
wondering if we should be efficient and not use a website. There you go. Thank you.
Do you have any questions though, Craig, while you're at it? All right. Any questions? I'm assuming none from you, Mary. All right. Any public comment on this agenda item? There are a couple hands raised here on Zoom. First hand up is David Cardinal.
Hi, thanks. If I was a candidate, the first question I would ask is what happened to Sharif? And why didn't he last? Because he seemed like he was doing really well. And I don't want to be the next one. And in particular, word is out among all the people who work in towns in San Mateo County that he was unsatisfied and thought he had a toxic work environment that includes some of the people who are still in government here, and that he got a settlement because he could. And that sounds really bad. And I don't think the town council's ever said anything publicly about why he was dismissed, why not. And if I was a new recruit, I'd be like, well, no, why would I go into that environment? So I think those questions have to be answered before we get anybody good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next hand up is Christy Corley.
Each month I get the San Mateo County listing of jobs available in our county, and I look every time for Portola Valley openings, and I was surprised not to ever find any listed there. And it seems like a logical place to put a job opening. And then obviously we would need a point person for that. There's also LinkedIn and recruiting that way. And I just encourage you to
Christy? I think you're breaking up.
looking at San Mateo County. So I think both counties might be looking at San Mateo County job openings. I encourage you to put it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Next up is a phone number that ends in 7562.
Great. Good evening, Caroline Vertonghen. First of all, I'm very disappointed because there were some technical issues. I could not access your meeting earlier. I'm very disappointed. Secondly, I don't think this is the position of this town council to make a decision, and I hope you will postpone this. We have elections, and there's candidates who want to use a different approach. We have dealt with town councilors who ignored our concerns, the financial concerns, for many years. We got emails saying that our concerns were invalid, that these people got raises because of merit. We did not see that, so I would like you to postpone this until we have a new council and then go forward from there. Thank you.
Next hand raised is Rita Comas.
I, for one, appreciate that you're looking at this as hiring an interim person initially. We're not looking for someone to come to our town to be a hero, but somebody that can actually just do the job based on, their job responsibilities. And that's much easier to get with somebody that is totally vetted. And I really hope that, there are more voices in the vetting of whomever it is we bring, retiree that did a spectacular job in their previous job, or, just somebody that someone knows. And when we then have the election next week and then look into a permanent one, I really hope that we wait a while for that and get this person, this hero, to come in and everyone can work with this person to get things done so that we can have a nice tidy package, something that will attract either an administrator or a town manager for the future. And I agree with one of the previous callers that talked about posting jobs other places. We have all these jobs and we're looking for people. We shouldn't be looking at nepotism for friends for these different jobs. We need to post them out there so other people know what we're offering and what we have, because this is an incredible town and it's a good place to work. And we appreciate the people that work in our town. Thank you.
Next up is Karen Askey.
Hi, everybody. How are you? I just really quickly for the public, I was wondering if you could clarify the time frame. We know Corey has agreed to be the interim town manager until mid-January of 2025. So first of all, would this interim town manager conceivably start before then? And how long do you envision the interim town manager being there, if you can give us a guesstimate? Thank you.
So I'll respond to that. I think yes, it's last public comment. Yes, it's correct that the intention is that Corey will continue to serve as interim town manager until mid-January, and the goal of this process is to have an interim town manager begin at that time. I think it's unknown how long the search process will take. I believe the last one was 6 months.
4 to 6, I can't
Okay.
recall, but
Yeah.
it's bet on 6.
Yeah. So that's as much as we know at this point.
All
All right, I do not see any additional hands raised on Zoom, no hands in the schoolhouse. So I'm going to close oral communications, public comment on this topic and bring it back for discussion with the council. Who would like to start?
Well, he already kind of tipped his hand, but
Yeah.
I agree with Craig. I'm leaning towards Baker Tilly. I mean, the modest cost saving, probably not the key point, but just the fact that they could potentially do both searches would be a benefit. I know a little bit of them. I think we've used them, or I'm familiar with their work in the past. They have a good reputation. Not to disparage Greg. It's just I would be comfortable with Baker Tilly. I'll just start there.
And I agree with both Craig and Jeff for the reasons they've shared. Mary, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, in a general vein, I do agree that it appears that this is the right solution to use the recruiter. I very much feel that we have to give that person, I think the council has to have some input with that person and has to point out the obvious things like Western cities, like San Mateo County and Santa Clara County job sites, all the things that absolutely they have to do in order to be and to do the things that we also said, which were to contact the Stanford Center for Innovation, which has thousands, 20,000 people that they contact with these opportunities. Do those things in addition. And I would like to see the council take some responsibility for making sure that the consultants are doing the job in a broader way. And let's see, what else did I have about this? I did want to say in a general sense from Cal Cities that in no way were we an exceptional town from having problems with retaining staff and with difficulties with a high touch population. I think if anything, we were exemplary in the sense that we love our staff and we try very hard to work with our staff. And I think there's been a lot of rejection onto this guilt thing about how we're making this happen as bad people. We're not bad people, we're all good people. And this is the state of cities in California right now. They're absolutely beleaguered financially, and they're absolutely beleaguered by a bureaucracy and a set of rules that make it very, very difficult to do the jobs that have been set out for them.
Thank you, Mary. So you're in favor of Baker Tilly? Or
I am in favor of Baker Tilly. I'm in favor of Baker Tilly if we, as a council, select either two people or one person to make sure that they're fully informed and engaged.
Great.
And not just put that onto the interim.
So I take your point about this is going to be a challenging search just because everyone's searching for similar things. You have to keep in mind from a practical perspective, so there's got to be a balance. Interim, we need quickly. We have until the end of the year. We do not have a lot of time, and it might seem like that's a long time away, and it really isn't. By the time we get someone up to speed and get them, up and running, they've projected timeframes that work with our needs, but adding to the process too much, like put all these, if we start imposing on their process when they've given us timelines that they are comfortable with, you might end up extending that runway. So you have to be careful with what direction you have. I would view it as council giving direction that we would like to suggest that we direct them to try within the time frame to open up their search. That might be met with, open arms. But if you say we need you to post on a site that has 30,000 candidates for an interim manager, that's not going to be practical. It's a separate thing, in my view, for a permanent town manager search, where I do think it's in our interest to to make sure we're being careful, thoughtful about the process, the involvement of people, you know, the council and the staff, et cetera. But for this, I do want to caution people that, you know, pragmatism is going to be what's required for the interim. And we'll have to figure out how to broaden it out by reasonable means. That's my only comment. And I'd be fine with Baker Tilly.
Okay, great. I absolutely agree with everything you just shared. So
Mhm.
efficiency has definitely got to be part of the process for the interim. So I'm hearing consensus amongst all five of us about the direction with Baker Tilly. I'm assuming we need a motion on this.
Yes.
So move.
I had a question about Mary's comment, though. Are you proposing? I don't know what you're proposing the council do, like.
Well, are we gonna just, I think one of us should approach Baker Tilly. I would suggest that we actually do it ourselves and talk to them about the process.
You mean the subcommittee remain engaged
Yeah,
to go over the
exactly.
process? So that, like,
So
go ahead, Jeff.
typically, you know, I mean, when we usually start a recruitment, the recruiter comes, I mean, I've usually met with the recruiter individually for like a half an hour or something just to get some input on it. And so I assume they've built that into their process. I mean, are you asking for something above and beyond that?
That's, I think having somebody they can touch base with regularly and that, yes, I mean, I think that
Well,
it's
yeah.
probably, it sounds like you're on the right track. I think we maybe need to beef it up a bit more so
So-
that we actually get a really good candidate.
Question is, are you asking if the subcommittee should continue? Do we want to
So is that, was it
continue?
automatically the mayor did that? Is that what you're saying, who automatically did that?
Mary, can I make a suggestion? I think your recommendation is the subcommittee continue to make sure the process is understood and articulated.
Exactly.
And then after that, my assumption is, Jeff, that the recruiter would contact each of us and talk with us about the needs. And then if you want, Mary, a backstop to, if they're confused and they need a point person, I don't mind the subcommittee continuing for that purpose, for efficiency.
Exactly.
Okay.
Great.
That's
So it's a-
that's what I'd like to do.
So a motion for Baker Tilly plus the continuation of the subcommittee.
Yes. So
I second it.
All right. Roll call.
Councilmember Alves,
aye.
Councilmember Hupkey,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Haskell,
Aye.
Mayor Warnikoff.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right. Thank you to those of you who have been patiently waiting. For item 4C. Before we get started, I just wanted to share that I'm recusing myself from this mid-pen presentation and all aspects of the Hawthorns project for my remaining tenure on the council. Although it's not legally required, my decision to recuse is based on an abundance of caution and optics. It was recently noticed that Patty and Jim White are involved with the historic complex. I've historically recused on projects that have to do with the White's Willow Commons project. And then that has been based on both optics and personal finances. Personal finances being defined as the FPPC regulation that it's required to recuse if there's over a $500 benefit due to the fact that my daughter, if accepted into Willow Commons, there would be travel savings for her to live locally versus somewhere else on the peninsula. It would equate to over $500 a year. So based on this, to avoid any unintended overlap with the historic complex, I am recusing. Vice Mayor Haskell attended the meeting as the alternate, and so she will be taking over the meeting from here. Before we do that, I just want to give a shout out to the team at MidPenn. I've been participating in those meetings. I believe we've had 7 very robust meetings beginning back in June 2023. I thought you guys are total pros. The meetings have been really, really well organized, extremely well researched. There's been a lot of great public participation. I also think all the individuals that served on that POG across the peninsula were fantastic. So just to thank you to you guys for that process and being great partners in our community. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. And you could come to the front if you've got a presentation. And Catherine, I want to make sure people understand what this meeting is and isn't in terms of the status of what we're doing, the council doing tonight.
Would you like me to make a statement about that?
Yes, well, I can colloquially discuss it. We are receiving a report from the PAWG, regarding its recommendation to the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space Board of Directors on aspects of the Hawthorne's open space. This is, my understanding is it's separate from the historical complex, which is over on the other side and has buildings on it that are going to be the subject of future discussions. We, as a council, are receiving a report. We are not making any decisions this evening. We are here to understand and discuss, but not make decisions. My understanding is this is step, I don't know, 4 out of 30. I mean, we're not far into the process, such that a lot of questions that I've heard from the public, which are very logical questions and understandable, we may not be able to answer tonight. And in particular, this is part of the Mid-Peninsula process that they normally undertake. There are going to be future iterations of discussions and refinements, in which you can pay attention to Mid-Pen and see when to weigh in there. And there may be additional opportunities should the town have input on particular aspects from a legal perspective. And that's where I'm talking colloquially. I don't want to get ahead of where we are, but do view this as a step that's fairly early in the process. Even though it's been going on a long time, there's like glacial type of aspect to the process here. I don't mean that in any pejorative way. It's just you're being very careful. You're gaining consensus. You're changing. You're evolving, but you're not done yet. And so, if you want to clarify that from your perspective, that would be great when you give your presentation. And Catherine, let me know if I got anything wrong.
No, you did a great job. And if you only just indulge me in one more comment, just for the record, I did want to note that my law firm, Shoot Mahali and Weinberger, represents Mid-Peninsula Open Space District on matters other than this matter. We do not represent Mid-Pen on this project, but I did just want to state that for the record, and note that I am very mindful of any conflicts of interest. And because we're so early in the process, I have not identified any, but I'm keeping an eye out for that. And if necessary, we'll need to take potentially some steps in regards to ensuring there are no conflicts. But I just want to put that out in the record. So thank you for indulging me in that.
And those will become clearer as the process moves forward, what exact steps need to be taken. Thank you. Okay, turn it over.
So, council members, I'm Susanna Chen, Assistant General Manager with Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. And I'm here with the project team for the Hawthorne area plan, including Mid-Pen staff, also our consultants. So I want to thank the council to give us this opportunity to present the project here tonight. And I also want to thank Vice Mayor, also the town attorneys for explaining to the public the process we are going through for this project and where we at in terms of our overall project. You actually stole a lot of my line as part of the opening remark. I just want to reiterate, and for those that are not familiar with this project is open space project undertaken by Mid-Pen. The focus is for public access, also land and resources management for the Hawthorne's property, which is owned by Mid-Pen, but located in your town. As mentioned earlier, we work with a public access working group over the last year to develop ecologically sensitive public access option for the Hawthorne's property. And tonight we are here to present those options for your feedback. And again, as was mentioned earlier, we're still early in our process. We are here to collect your feedback, and we will be bringing those feedbacks back to our board, which is the governing body for our organization. And our board will ultimately collect all the feedbacks and making the final decisions to decide which option will be included in the area plan. And ultimately, the plan will be advanced into the next phase, which is environmental review. You're probably familiar with that. And as a government agency, our board will be the governing body to review and certify the environmental document for the area plan, including the public access elements of that. And that will allow us to move into the implementation and permitting phase of this project. And when we're still a couple years before we will reach the permitting phase of this project. And when we do reach that phase, we will be coming back, bringing plans that are more developed, and then we'll be working with the town to go through the permitting phase. So again, we want to thank you for this opportunity so that we can collect your early feedback. And we look forward to the conversation tonight. And then we're committed to continue to work with council, your staff, and the community as we advance this project. So I know I talk fast, but our project team will provide you more detail about the project, about the timeline. So now I'm going to turn it over to them to give you the presentations. Thanks.
Thank you, Susanna. Good evening, council members. We're pleased to be here tonight. I'm Tina Hugg, Senior Planner with MidPenn, and I'm joined by Ashley Mack, who's managing this project with me. And we're also joined by our consultant team who's sitting in the audience, traffic engineer Andrew Lee and landscape architect Paul Stevenson. Our presentation tonight is going to include a brief overview of MidPenn and the project and a high-level overview of the POG process before we'll go through their recommendations and our next steps. As Susanna mentioned, this is a feedback session, and the comments received today and from last week's town ad hoc committee on this project will be presented to our board of directors at a study session early next year. As Susanna mentioned, we are in an early phase, and this current phase is focused on determining a concept for the parking and trail system at the property that we can incorporate it into an area plan or a master plan for in the future environmental review phase. Our quick intro to MidPenn, I think a lot of folks know who we are. We're a public agency formed in 1972. We've been elected board of 7 directors. We've protected over 70,000 acres at this point. We serve 770,000 constituents throughout our jurisdictional boundary and recognize that our visitors come from well beyond that boundary. And our preserves are open free of charge 7 days a week. Our mission is one that has 3 branches. It's to preserve open space, protect it, restore it, and then also provide opportunities for ecologically sensitive recreation and education. Our jurisdiction is large, as you can see on the map in front of you. We encompass 17 cities, 2 counties, 3 counties. You can count a little smidge of Santa Cruz County, from San Carlos to Los Gatos and coast to coast. Hawthorne's and Windy Hill are denoted by the purple star on the map. Our project overview is going to just cover quickly the prior planning process and work we've completed before this phase. Again, everyone's familiar with the Hawthorns, but it's the 79-acre property located in the town across from Roberts Market. It's officially part of Windy Hill to the west. In this aerial image, you can see Los Troncos to the east, Alpine Road to the north, and the property is surrounded by residential and commercial. It has been closed to public ownership since 2011 when the ownership passed to Mid-Penn. It is subject to a conservation easement held by Peninsula Open Space Trust or POST, which seeks to protect the property's conservation values by establishing parameters of development that through which Mid-Penn can provide public access. Hawthorne's is also part of Measure AA, which was a bond measure passed in 2014 that identified funding to open Hawthorne's to the public. It's Portfolio 6, as you see in front of you, and this project does exist due to voter and board approved direction. The official language for Measure AA is in the white box at the bottom. The project itself has a potential to provide many benefits for the town, natural open space close to the center, alignment with the recreation element and the trails element with regard to regional open space and through trail connections, recreational opportunities for a variety of users, dog walkers, hikers, pedestrian, bicyclists, connections to your extensive regional trail trail system, and potential to help with the safe route to school gap that it currently exists. And depending on the parking lot options selected, the potential to improve the intersection at Portola Road and Alpine Road. The conservation easement is held by POST, as I mentioned, and identifies conservation values on the property, natural resources, recreation, historic, habitat, and riparian resources. It allows for low intensity recreational uses and improvements that we typically offer at Mid-Penn Preserves. And as was mentioned before, there are 2 planning projects currently underway at Hawthorne's, the Hawthorne's area plan that's here tonight, and then the historic complex, which is under its own planning process and schedule, and will be going to the Planning Commission on November 6th. Again, no decision-making is happening yet. More to come. The purpose of the area plan, this is a comprehensive plan. It's like a master plan for the Hawthorne's area that describes it, the long-term uses, the land and resource management activities that we are contemplating, and a pathway to establish public access on the property. As Susanna alluded to, this is a part of a multi-phase project. We've completed 2 phases of work. The first was vision and goals. The second was existing conditions and opportunities constraints. We have now gotten about midway through phase 3, which is focused on public access programming and conceptual planning. Again, we're not making decisions yet. We're still collecting feedback to present to our board later in the next year. And the intent of phase 3 is to develop the concept for public access, and that means parking trails, and that we would fold all of that into a comprehensive area plan that would touch upon the other aspects of our work, resources, and land management. If we receive board approval in the future, that area plan, this is way out, it would become the project that we would evaluate during the environmental review phase. Since we still have to do the area plan, we are talking a couple of years out. This is the vision and goals for the Hawthorne's area plan that was developed in the first phase, and it's related to providing ecologically sensitive public access that's consistent with the district's mission and the allowable uses outlined in the conservation easement. There are also 6 approved goals for the Hawthorne's area. These 6 carry through the entire process. I'm going to switch over to the public access framework that is an extension of those goals. This was developed in the existing conditions phase and then offered to the Public Access Working Group, or POG, as we would probably call it from here on out. And they base their work using this as a framework. This public access framework was intended to inform and frame and guide their conversation about public access as it relates to the resource management, aesthetic, cultural, natural resources, operations and maintenance needs, and how they affect how public access is provided on the property. These management areas are further broken down into subtopics. The path itself is rather large. These are just the headings. They form the basis for the POG's work as they develop their parking and trail options. And 3 in particular became their main focus of discussions. And they're circled: natural resources, aesthetics, and traffic safety. Key site opportunities and constraints. The property is able to provide recreation and is able to provide trail access, drive access, on-site parking, potential for multimodal access, and interpretation, education, and public engagement. But it is a small site, and it comes with numerous constraints, not least of which is steep topography, limited locations for driveway access, aesthetic considerations, sightline limitations, natural resources and cultural resources on the property, and of course, traffic. These definitely influence the working group's efforts, as you will see in a moment. At a high level, Hawthorne's area is comprised of grasslands, oak woodlands, and non-native evergreen forests that provide a diverse landscape for native and special status wildlife. This map shows a key vegetation communities on the property and graphically some of the resources on the property, including wood rat nests, bats, steelhead trout. And we recognize that it is a habitat throughway for a lot of wildlife. This map took a more expansive look at the overall constraints that influenced and informed the POG's work. A more detailed locations map for the wood rat nests, visible areas of the preserve from the homes to the southwest. Vegetation communities, more specifically oaks and olives. The topography shows the steepness of the property, and then calling out the scenic corridor along Alpine Road. In terms of community engagement and outreach, we've done a lot through the last 3 years in a variety of different ways. We had, of course, the 7 POG meetings that were already mentioned. We had stakeholder meetings and conversations with a variety of local entities, including Portola Valley Ranch, Portola Valley School District, Alpine Swim and Tennis, and Roberts Market, as well as we've already met with the Town Ad Hoc Committee. We've had neighborhood meetings, tours, open houses, et cetera, in the entire process from all 3 phases. We've also noticed our work through the website. We've sent out surveys and flyers, posted it on our social media. We've also communicated with the town and requested distribution through the town's channels and their distribution lists. We also, are in the process of continuing that engagement now and into the future phases of work. And with that, I'm going to pass the meat of the presentation over to Ashley, and she'll go into the work of the POG. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Good evening, council members. I'm going to walk you through the public access working group process on a very high level and then focus on their recommendations for your feedback. And my name is Ashley Mag, Planner 3 with MidPen. So here are our 15 lovely Hawthorne's area public access working group members. There are 7 ward stakeholders, 6 interest area representatives, 1 representative each from MidPen Board and Portola Valley's Town Council. We're delighted to have both our co-chairs here tonight, Helen Quinn and Rachel Osland. So the purpose of the public access working group was a forum where a diverse group of people come together, share their different perspectives, and help MidPen find a way to open Hawthorne's to the public that meets the board's vision and goals. The group looked at where to put their parking and entrances, how to provide trail access, what kind of uses to recommend, and how and where to connect to surrounding trails. The park's work was informed by the existing conditions, opportunities, and constraints analysis completed in phase 2, as Tina mentioned. And we are looking at the table here is on top, the orange color highlights where we are in the planning process, phase 3, programming and conceptual, and public access is throughout each step of the way. Tonight's feedback session is to collect your input on their recommendations. No decision-making at the time. We had a feedback session with the town ad hoc committee here on last Monday, October 21st. And we're asking the town to kindly forward us any public comments that received from those 2 sessions. So tonight's feedback from the council member as well as the public comments will be packaged and forwarded to our board. After those 2 feedback sessions, we will return the body of the work to Mid-Pan for a study session with the board as well as a final meeting. And our board will make final decisions and that will help us conclude the work on phase 3. And those decisions will determine the public access components to include in the Hawthorne's area plan to advance to environmental review for CEQA as part of phase 4. And in phase 5 implementation, that's when Mid-Pan staff will submit a formal permit application to the town, which will be about 3 years from now. So on the high level, here's the timeline for the 7 public access working group meetings. As you can see, from July 23 to June 24. And the first 2 meeting was ways for the POG to have an overview of the site as well as the conditions. The photos here are showing our site meeting where we visited potential locations for parking and trail connection, and there were about 70 participants. Meeting 3 to 5 was mainly focused on design discussions. The POG evaluated 8 concept options for parking, reviewed various considerations, advanced trail and parking design. They had breakout group discussions and informal voting in Mid-Pan boardroom. They also had non-quorum tours. At meeting 6, there was another site meeting. The POG and the community revisited potential locations for parking and trail connections. They also collected feedback from the community. And the final meeting in June, that's where the POG discussed and confirmed their recommendations on the public access components. So I'm going to now finally walk you through the recommendations from the working group. And again, we're here to collect your feedback on their recommendations and we'll bring back to the PAN board for their decision making. So the POG evaluated and voted on the public access components on the screen. And in this order, I will guide you through the recommendations from trail system, connectivity to regional connections, as well as trail uses, and conclude with recommended parking options. Before we jump into the recommendations, this is the gradients of agreement that we used for voting. So the POG members would have a set of 6 numbers and values from 1 to 4 were considered supportive of a voting item. Here are the recommendations from the POG on the trail alignments. Mid-Pan Trail Crew designed the 1.4-mile trail loop shown in purple on the map. The POG suggested additional trail segments. These are the dark gray and white trails. POG supported the internal trail loop in purple, segments 2 to 10. They also supported the 3 spur trails to the viewpoints, segments 11, 12, and 13, as well as the benches A through C on the viewpoints. In terms of trail connections to the surrounding trails, the POG supported connection to Alpine Trail, segments 1, 10, and 14. They decided to not have a connection to Sweet Springs Trail by Saddleback Drive, segment 15 was taken out. They also suggested a phased approach to reevaluate trail segments 16 and 17 in the future after Hawthorne is open to the public and the level of usage is evaluated. Here is a constraints map Tina showed earlier, and the POG's work is overlaid on top. The POG uses overlay to evaluate their priorities and trade-offs. The diagram on the top left shows the trails the town has included in the town general plan's trail and path element as suggestions for Midpen. And you can see the property is highlighted in yellow and the trails are dashed in the hatched area. So in terms of, I think as I mentioned earlier, the POG was interested in expanding trail opportunities beyond the 1.4-mile trail loop proposed by our trail crew. They were interested in connecting to town trail segments and the desired trail connections in the town's general plan. For these reasons, they added segments 16 and 17. To evaluate, so they evaluated those options during the POG process and they received a lot of public comments afterwards. In terms of the alignment, the POG acknowledged feedback received related to the concerns about the visibility from nearby homes. Regarding potential trail connection to Sweet Springs Trail, the POG received both support and opposition for the proposed linkage. The POG's final recommendation is to reevaluate trail segments 16 and 17 in the future, and Midpen would reevaluate no sooner than 3 years after the preserve is open to the public, allowing Midpen to assess the level of usage. And if low level of usage indicates preserve capacity and at the direction of Midpen board, staff will engage with the town to discuss proposed future connections from Hawthorne's to the Sweet Springs Trail. And depending town's capacity and interest, Midpen and town will work together with Portola Valley Ranch and community to address concerns related to the trail connection. Next, I'm going to share with you a video. We are standing at Sweet Springs Trail looking at those proposed segments. So Sweet Springs Trail is on the left of the fence, Hawthorne's property on the right. Segment 16 is around here by the cluster of trees. And you can see the node. This is, of course, during the fall, around this time of the year. And segment 17 is around this area, meandering down to Sweet Springs Trail. And here is a connection the POG suggested. And acknowledging desired future trail connections in the town general plan's trail and path element, the POG supported for future regional connection to Los Trancos Trail, as well as connection to nearby preserves, Arrestradero and Foothills Nature Preserve. The POG recognized these connections would require conversations with adjacent property owners and the involvement of the town, but want to recognize these desires for larger regional connections. When it comes to trail uses or recreational opportunities, the POG supported multi-uses on the trail. They supported hiking, dog on leash, equestrian, and bike use on the internal trail loop, as well as spur trails and connections to Alpine Trail. Those are highlighted in purple and dark gray. And those are the segments 1 through 14. Currently, the segment of Alpine Trail does not allow bikes. So town approval would be needed to change the use and complete the safe route to school on the trail. Finally, as mentioned earlier, the feasibility of Trail 16 and 17 will be evaluated after Hawthorns is open to the public and Mid-Penn can evaluate the level of usage. Also, the uses currently occur on Sweet Springs Trail would need to be reviewed by the town. The POG spent a lot of time and energy selecting a location for parking and entrance along Alpine Road. As you can see on the map, the parking area highlighted in gray are the 8 concept parking options they evaluated and also eliminated. Each option involves trade-offs and the POG had to identify key priorities. They weren't fully satisfied with any of the options from 1 through 8. The POG landed on the options 9 and 10 because they better address the key considerations, which are traffic safety, natural resources, and aesthetics. During the development of each parking option, every time the POG generated new ideas, Mid-Penn shared with Post and made sure they are in alignment with the conservation easement. Overall, the POG supported both parking options 9 and 10 with a larger level of support for option 10, and I will go into details later for that. They supported a upper limit of 50 spaces, a phased approach if it's feasible, and they put together detailed assessments for the pros and cons of those options. Zooming in, here are the 4 of the 8 options the POG evaluated and ultimately eliminated. They, as mentioned, there were many considerations and we distilled them to the key considerations on the screen. For options 1 through 3, the main concern was natural resources impact to the Hawthorns Meadow and the impact to the integrity of the woodland habitat. With option 4, the primary concern was traffic safety of the proposed entrance at Alpine Road by North Forest Avenue. For options 5 to 7, again, the POG was mainly concerned of natural resources impact to the undeveloped area of the preserve. And for option 4, traffic safety was brought up again as the main concern because the proposed entrance is close to Alpine and Hillbrook, and in terms of speed of vehicle and bicycles, they are at a higher speed. I just want to show you a couple photos of the meadows I mentioned earlier, and you can see the natural beauty as well as the natural resources that connect to those meadows. And that's why the POG decided to eliminate options 1 through 3 and 5, 6, and 7. And the diagram here shows the preferred location of the preferred option 9 and 10. These 2 options are very close to each other, as you can see, and they're across the street from existing commercial area, as well as parking areas, gas stations, etc. During the POG process, Mid-Penn received over 150 public comments, along with verbal feedback at each meeting. Traffic safety, natural resources, and aesthetics were identified as top priorities for the POG, and they struggled with options 1 through 8. The POG members expressed a preference for parking to be located near the existing driveway to the ranger's residence and suggested placing it closer to Alpine Portola intersection near or clustered with the commercial area. And that's why these 2 options were developed towards the end of the public access working group process. Both options, as mentioned, are closer to the part of Alpine Road where vehicle and bicycles are at a lower speed and clustered by the existing commercial area. Zooming in to the preferred option 9, again, for both option 9 and 10, they have a shorter driveway compared to the other options, 50 stalls of head-in parking, and a turnaround for internal circulation. Option 9 shows here is using the existing driveway to the staff residence. The existing condition of the proposed parking area is relatively steeper and would require more retaining wall. We're talking about this part of the parking area. And comparing to the other 8 options, it maximized traffic safety, minimized natural resources impact by staying on the perimeter of the preserve near the existing commercial area. In terms of this Alpine Road scenic corridor, screening and the berms would be required as part of the design to minimize effects on the scenic corridor. Here is option 10. Similar to option 9 in terms of number of parking spaces, and it is utilizing the Alpine Portola intersection, a 3-way stop for driveway and access. It has the smallest footprint and require less retaining wall than option 9. This option maximizes traffic safety and has the least impact to natural resources. That's why the POG has greater level of support for this option. Similar to option 9, screening and berms would also be part of the design to minimize the effects on Alpine Road scenic corridor. Both of the design options would include 15 bike parking spaces to encourage alternative modes of travel. Keep that in mind. I will show you a couple videos looking from the inside of the preserve. This is the area of proposed parking option 10. The intersection is further away where the car is. There is a Roberts Market commercial parking area across the street. Existing driveway entrance gate. And here is option 9. Where you can see this side of this side is much steeper than the other side where option 10 is proposed. And next video, we are looking at option 10 at a different angle. The intersection, Portola Alpine, where the car turned, and Roberts Market is further away. And the proposed parking would be between the tree and the yellow flags on the other side. So just give you a sense of the landscape. All right, so some people might wonder why 50 parking spaces? We've heard like the town's existing trails, the proposed trails would be mainly used by nearby residents. So 50 spaces seem like quite a lot for a small preserve. We know, however, the space has potential for serving regional trail connectivity. And this is the map that's showing you where we are coming from. And also Midpan is a regional open space district, serve a larger jurisdiction and population. Additionally, during the POG process, we received community concerns about overflow parking in the residential area along Alpine Road. We've heard over the years, the main parking lot at Windy Hill is too small and people park on the shoulder of the road. Our parking demand analysis indicated that parking demand for future visitation at Hawthorne's area ranges from 25 to 70 spaces. By setting the capacity at 50 in the middle, we aim to balance both sets of the concerns. Additionally, the number also accommodates general public access of the historic complex. There will likely be a period of time where visitor demand either exceeds or fall below the amount. providing more parking might attract more people driving in, while providing less parking increase the likelihood of overflow visitor parking on adjacent roadways. MidPen will monitor conditions at Hawthorne's after it's open to the public and work with the town to balance the issues and develop responses during periods of high parking demand. I will now pass it to Andrew Lee from Parametrics to go over the parking demand analysis with more data. He will also walk you through traffic volumes on the surrounding roadways.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, council members, Andrew Lee, Senior Traffic Engineer with Parametrics, been working with MidPen staff on this project. This slide refers to the parking demand, how we calculated it. First thing we did was collect some data. The map on the top left shows several of the preserves managed by MidPen, where we collected parking demand counts for an entire day on both a weekday and on a weekend for two periods in a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. So in total, we collected parking demand observations during the daytime for 4 separate periods. Based on that, we were able to estimate when the periods of peak demand were, which were typically in the morning on weekend days, much less parking demand on weekdays. So we can reasonably estimate that there will be similar usage patterns at Hawthorne's if it is opened. Then in terms of the peak parking demand, as Ashley mentioned, there is both a 50-space parking lot, but also periods of overflow parking observed on the adjacent streets. And so based on direct observations and spillover counts, there was an estimate of between 110 and 120 vehicles during the peak periods, weekend, morning, early afternoon. Then I have something called the Hawthorne's Area Adjustment Factor. And what I'm referring to there is that Windy Hill is a large preserve. It has much longer trails. A person using that preserve can go for much longer, and therefore the parking demand reasonably would be higher as a larger site for a longer duration. So as a smaller preserve, we're estimating that Hawthorne's would be between 30 and 70% fewer visitors, just based on the characteristics of the size and the uses. However, because Hawthorne's is relatively close to other preserves where somebody could chain their trip or visit multiple preserves, we're estimating that combined demand between the attractiveness of Hawthorne's and other preserves could bump that demand back up between 15 and 35%. And then lastly, because Hawthorne's is closer to the center of town here in Portola Valley, it's adjacent to other commercial uses, and it's got a very large number of people walking and biking in the area already. We're estimating that there are a significant number of people, between 35 and 40% of people, that would choose to walk, ride, roll, ride their horse, or other means to get to Hawthorne's rather than drive. So if you put all that math together, we wind up from 110 to 120 with the various additions and subtractions at between 25 and 70 vehicles for peak demand, and roughly in the middle, it's 50 spaces. Next slide, please. I just want to talk briefly about traffic and what it means for the Hawthorne's area in terms of the existing vehicle traffic and what sort of traffic capacity we're dealing with. The map on the lower center of the slide is indicating locations where the town of Portola Valley already collects traffic data for their traffic surveys to set speed limits. It's done every 5 to 7 years. So MidPen commissioned counts at a subset of those locations, which are indicated in order to figure out, for the purposes of our study, how do our traffic counts compare to the historic records that the town already has in place. And what we found is that between 2019 to the count that MidPen collected in 2023, traffic volumes have gone down slightly. And the two that I want to highlight for you is, the first one is Alpine Road at Westridge Road, which is at Westridge at the northeastern portion of the town just before you get to Highway 280, which represents what you would consider as the peak demand for traffic volumes as the gateway of sorts into the town, one of two gateways, right? It's also one of the critical evacuation routes. There is the town's wildfire traffic assessments that was performed in 2022. And then it was brought to my attention that there was a subsequent study, wildland urban interface study that was performed in 2024. Those two reports are complementary, and I did review both of them in depth. What I can conclude there is that closer to Hawthorne's, closer to the center of Portola Valley, the parking demand is roughly 55 to 60% of the peak demand at Westridge, which means that there's 40% less traffic demand, and therefore there is available capacity to accommodate visitation, specifically at the Hawthorne site. We are not quite near capacity, which is most likely in excess of the 11 to 12,000 that's currently observed at Westridge Road. And so what we're seeing here is that the traffic is within the realm of being able to be managed. We're not near a critical capacity kind of condition. And then just briefly on the weekends, weekends represent about 60%, 55 to 60% of the peak or the weekday average, which means that even though there's large amounts of vehicle driving demand on weekends associated with the Mid-Penn preserves, they happen on days of generally lower traffic compared to weekday periods. Next slide, please. And just to illustrate that, among the traffic counts that Mid-Penn commissioned, these were traffic counts collected for an entire week. So not just one day samples. We collected traffic counts for 7 continuous days. And the graph on the left shows Alpine Road east of Nathorst, which is beyond where the Roberts Market commercial interface is. We just wanted to pick up the traffic that was on Alpine Road. And the two peaks that you see, those are representative of weekday traffic patterns. They're amongst traffic engineers, it's the AM peak and the PM peak associated with school traffic, work commutes. The graph with no peak whatsoever, just the bell curve line, those are weekend peak period trips. And so even at its worst, the current traffic on Alpine Road during weekends is roughly the same as the midday period of a weekday. So we're not talking about serious traffic capacity issues on weekend days as compared to weekdays. The graph on the right is a count of bicycle volumes. And so that is different because the two lines that are highly peaked there do show weekend period trips, roughly 150 to almost 200 bicycle trips. So that demand, that capacity does coincide with when the peak periods of activity could happen at a Hawthorne site. And so that's what factored into a lot of our analysis in terms of traffic safety and recommendations for how to site the access played in because of such high bicycle demand. I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Andrew. And this concludes our overview of the Public Access Working Group. I'm going to invite our co-chairs, Helen and Rachel, to provide some remarks.
Hello, my name is Rachel Oslin. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Hawthorne's Public Access Working Group. And I'm not a member of the Portola Valley community, but I am part of the greater Mid-Penn area that Mid-Penn serves. The Public Access Working Group, as you heard, was challenged to consider how to make the Hawthorne space accessible to all stakeholders, which means the residents of the town. It also means those who have, it also means residents, as we talked about there, but residents of the other wards, of which I am one, who have chosen to live nearby to nature in order to balance their lifestyle in many other ways, and to be able to still enjoy everything. But they're also trying to balance it with another stakeholder, the flora and the fauna. So we've looked at all of those pieces as we did that. So this is a small park. And as we were looking at it, you heard parking became a really big concern for all of us. But I want to point out that as someone who doesn't live in the town, but is still entitled to be able to take advantage of mid-pen spaces, I can't get to it any other way. There's no public transit. We need vehicle access in order to be able to do that. And so we really need to be able to consider it of those spaces in order to be able to be accessible to all users. A lot of concerns were voiced about the impact of additional vehicles, both in terms of overflow and what would happen in times of emergency. However, I also want to point out that a park this small is really not going to attract a lot of visitors once the novelty has worn off, particularly when you look at the fact that our recommendations are to come back and look at the connector trails at a later date. So right now we're looking at that trail that goes around the edges of the park, but is not currently connecting to Sweet Springs Trail. I also wanted to just think about there that as you're coming forward and looking at this and supporting, hopefully, the opening of this park, that you're supporting this not just for all of you residents of Portola Valley who have chosen to have the nature in your backyard, but to encourage the next generation of people who are coming to use this space and to inspire them to become the same caretakers that we're all trying to be here. I also want you heard as they described what we thought about as the working group, and I just want to really point out that as we went through this process, we challenged Mid-Penn to come back when there were no good options. We really wanted to be thoughtful, considerate to all of those stakeholders that I matched at the beginning. And when there wasn't any good options, we really did ask them to come back and come with other thoughts. And so we really did try to consider what every stakeholder it is, not just the members of the town, but everyone that for whom it matters. So given the level of thoughtfulness that we are all bringing this to you now, I'm sure that you will take this into consideration and be able to bring this forward and consider the recommendations that we've brought forward to you, and the board is already beginning to review, and add your thoughts to the mix to make sure that this can really be available for everyone. Thank you.
So I'm Helen Quinn. I am Portola Valley resident, in fact, Portola Valley Ranch resident, so next door. But I was not representing Portola Valley on this committee. I was asked to serve by Margaret McNiven, who's our elected representative for Ward 6, which includes Portola Valley, but a lot more, down to the Bay and Redwood City. And so I saw myself as representing both the town and the wider space. We heard a lot of comment, and I think the committee worked particularly hard to take that into account in the way they came to their voting for the final choices. I think there's a plan here that should be able to be made to work. There's a piece that's not finished, which of course is the historical element. The whole property will not be decided on until that last piece has been put into play. But we did make a recommendation that there should be a trail connection through there because that's an important part of the town general plan and was asked for by the Town Trails Committee. I think you have lots of chances further for input, but I think for the current stage, this committee really did their job. Not me, but the committee as a whole worked hard, particularly on the parking. And the reason we got to favoring number 10 was because that's the safest access to the property from the road. for those of you who are Portola Valley, one of the options that was eliminated is an access to parking from Los Trancas Road. And the reason is the traffic engineers told us that is simply not safe because of the curves in the road near where the gate is. It's for a public access to the property there. It was just not feasible. So that's why that isn't one of the options we considered. I think that's all I have to say. I hope that the town will move forward in cooperation with Mid-Penn so that we can all walk those trails. I'm hoping they'll be there before I stop being able to walk them.
Thank you, Ashley, Helen, and Rachel. I'll now go over the next steps in the project and then turn it back to council. I think it's been mentioned a few times now, we are in phase 3. And after we complete the public access portion of this phase, we're going to then pull the national plan together. So there's going to be time yet to pull the plan together where we're pulling the uses in, the resource management actions, the land management, all of those bits that go in with public access. So public access is just one element of our plan. And assuming our board eventually approves that plan, that is the plan that would move forward into environmental review. And that would be in a couple of years. Environmental review being in phase 4, the one that follows phase 3. This is after we've compiled the area plan with all those components that I mentioned. Per CEQA, Mid-Penn would be the lead agency, and we would be required to disclose the effects of this proposed project on the environment, the potential effects, and we would develop an official project description that would be based on the area plan and conduct any necessary technical studies to evaluate those potential environmental impacts. This could include biological, botanical, traffic, circulation, additional visual studies, and so on. And we'd also be looking at any mitigation measures as needed for any identified potential impacts. The environmental review process would entail more meetings, more public meetings, and documents that would be in for review. And then our board would be at the end the ones to certify that CEQA document before they approve the entire project. I'm describing phase 4, which is a little ways away, but just to clarify, the environmental review will occur. It's just a little bit later down the line. And as we're currently still in phase 3, working on programming and conceptual design and determining what to include in the area plan as far as public access. Again, we're in that orange rectangle, and at tonight's town council meeting, we hope to get your feedback as well as any public comments that were received by the council and package that up to provide to our board at their study session early next year. And again, a final meeting by our board would occur where they would make their final policy decisions. And as we conclude, just a final thought. Throughout the POG process, both the POG and Mid-Penn heard a lot of concerns about what coalesced into 3 main areas, and that was natural resources, traffic, and aesthetics. So they became very informed by these concerns that were raised, and they're individual concerns that some were raised as standalone issues. But one of the challenges that we have is trade-offs and the need to actually merge these concerns because they cannot exist alone. You address one and it pulls on the other. And so you'll see from the plans that were presented that the POG struggled pretty greatly, and that's why there are 10 options. And there are trade-offs in all of them. No single option can address 100% all of these concerns. And this process is going to be repeated by our Mid-Penn board as well. They're going to have these same considerations, and we'll have to weigh all of this in mind as they move forward in their decision making. So again, this is before you now, and so that this is also the question for you as well. So, thank you. We would like to just thank the members of the POG and members of the community who have spent their time with us through this year-plus long effort. So with that, pass it back to the.
Thank you very much. Clearly a lot of work. What I want to do is see what questions the council has. Open it up for public comment and then come back for discussion, but we're not going to be taking a particular action. We're going to be voicing, areas of discussion. Okay, any questions, Jeff?
Yeah, sorry, you mentioned it and I'm not sure I caught all of it. The biking, were you thinking of biking, would the trails in the Hawthorns be open to bikes?
Yes, that's the POG's current recommendations to group use.
Okay.
And present it to the board.
All of them?
All the uses.
Okay. And there's the one that runs along Alpine Road, and you mentioned it as a safe routes to school trail, and that's your trail or our trail? I thought it was yours.
It's trail.
Oh, that's our trail. Okay.
Mhm.
And that one is, I don't think it's currently open to bikes. Is that
That is
correct?
correct.
Okay. Right.
That would use would have to change. Include it.
Right. And then the connections to your other properties, the connection to Arostradero looks like it runs mostly along the roads. Is that correct? I couldn't see it very well on the map. My eyes aren't that good.
They didn't show it. They didn't. show it.
Okay. Right. Okay. Okay.
Helen, if this is
Please don't
gonna
come to the
go a little
microphone,
bit,
sorry,
you
so
should
people
be
at home can hear.
talking into
Yeah.
the mic, please. Thank you.
So the town trail runs along Los Trancas Road until the beginning of the Hawthorns property. There's a gap which on the town trail maps always thought to go into the Hawthorns property. Eventually, when that property was subdivided, because that's the only time the town can build new trails.
And that
And
trail,
then
and that
the-
trail runs up Los Trancos Road so you could get into Foothills Park? Is that?
It then runs up Los Trancas Road, starting from Oak Forest Court on up. There is not a trail access to Foothills Park because Foothills Park was not letting non-Palo Alto people in. There is a future plan for a possible access to Foothills
Not
Park,
Foothills,
but there is not currently an access trail to Foothills from that side.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay, thank you for
And,
pointing out.
and as far as the Alpine Trail goes, it is not yet a safe route to school because it's not safe for bicycles.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
horses and everybody as it currently. What would need to happen is the fence moves back. So that's something the town needs to negotiate with Mid-Penn to achieve a safe, a safe route to school trail there requires the town to do some work.
Thank you. Okay. Those are my questions for the moment.
Mary, what questions do you have?
Well, I have a number of questions. You said that on November 6th, the Planning Commission was going to be meeting to discuss the historic complex?
They are, that project team is going to the planning commission for feedback. There's no application, nothing. We're.
But it will
seeking-
be reviewed this November 6th.
The item is going to be presented, but there's
Presented,
nothing to
right.
review.
Okay. And then the second was, when and why was the project divided into a historic use and into the open space? Is that covered or can you re-clarify it for me?
Yes, early on in the process, the existing conditions, opportunities and constraints considered the entire property. When it moved into public access, the complexity of the historic complex, the cultural resources there, the historic resources there, indicated that we would have to take a different approach. And we were also seeking a partner. And so the interest in opening up the area that is part of the area plan was deemed sort of the focus. In order to open up Hawthorne's sooner, we would pull the historic complex off on its own path because it's going to be much more complicated. That would allow the area plan to move forward and eventually have this property open to the public sooner.
Okay, and I think my fourth question was whether phase 4 would include the historic section as well. So when you go to CEQA and the environmental review, will that include the historic complex?
If we don't know what's happening at the historic complex, we wouldn't have enough information to study it. We wouldn't have a project there. If there's enough information on that particular part of the property, when we go through CEQA, we would include it. But at this point, given its current timeline, it's lagging behind the area plan. And so it would have to do its own CEQA process at the time that its project is known.
Okay. I think that was my questions.
Greg?
So I guess just to start to follow up on the residential complex, when do you guys think you're likely to move that forward? Yeah, the historic residential complex, maybe just historic.
Currently, the focus is only on one of the buildings in the complex due to a potential partnership opportunity. So the entire complex, it's uncertain when that entire complex will be back. The lower barn is the one that's under study right now. It's a little bit further from the main 3 buildings that are by Los Troncos Road. That effort is totally separate, and because of the current focus on that, there's no timeline for the other 3 buildings at this point.
But it's probably reasonable to assume that it's not going to be close to the area plan completion.
At this time, yes. I mean, it's on a different timeline. It's lagging behind.
Yeah. Okay. Wildlife corridors, you guys sort of mentioned it, but what are the wildlife corridors sort of in and out of the property?
Basically, the meadow areas, there are a few meadows inside the preserve. So those are all wildlife corridors for the habitat.
Right, can they get from the Hawthorne's property to other open space areas?
Yes, so they currently are, going through the preserve to different parts of the town. But if we build a parking lot inside the preserve, that would cut off the wildlife corridor or the connectivity of the habitat.
So you're saying it would cut it off?
It would have impact on the corridor.
Okay, yeah, I guess the question I was trying to ask is, have you studied kind of the wildlife flow, like to understand what the corridors are?
Yeah, our natural resources during the phase 2, the public access framework, as well as opportunities and constraints. There's a document of thousands of pages studying different wildlife, vegetation as well. So those were included in phase 2 of the project.
And there's some analysis on the impact of the wildlife corridor on the parking option 10?
Not specifically for that option, but the advantage of that is it stays on the perimeter of the preserve and stays with the commercial area, which has the least impact to the interior of the preserve, where there are more vegetation and wildlife moving within the property.
Okay. You talk about, and Jess sort of mentioned this, but you talk about connections to other open space, I'll just call it open spaces. But it was kind of unclear to me, like if I park at the Hawthorns, like which ones can I get to realistically?
Walk to Windy Hill.
Well, can you? I mean,
Yes.
by doing what? Like,
going in front of, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what the connections might be.
The Hawthorne's area fronts Alpine Road Trail, and folks will be able to go up Alpine Road Trail and reach one of the entrances to Windy Hill. It's, well, the map's not up.
Okay, so that's the major connection you're talking about, going up by coal mine.
Yes, heading up to the,
Okay. And then the foothills and the Rastradero, I guess I didn't really understand. Like, that doesn't seem like that really is a workable option. I get foothills wasn't originally planned because it wasn't open to the public. But a Rastradero, is there a way into a Rastradero from here realistically?
not currently, not from Mid-Penn's side.
Is a possibility, but again, it is not a trail at the moment.
Okay. The
Like
next-
20 years ago, when I was chair of the Town Trails Committee, we tried to make that connection. It didn't happen because Palo Alto wasn't interested.
Sure, yeah, there,
So-
yeah, it seems like there might be a couple options. I just wondered whether they're getting pursued. So, thank you.
There is hope that that might be an option, and that would connect only if you had the piece that's in the historic complex,
Right.
which is one of the reasons this book said to the historic complex group, think about this trail when you're looking at that area.
Right.
There's nothing we can put in there, but think about it later.
Okay, thank you. In terms of internal roads, there's a bunch of roads inside Hawthorne's currently, I mean, dirt roads, except for maybe the Rangers residence, which is maybe gravel. Are those going to continue to be there or they get removed? Like, how do you sort of see this getting developed?
There's one main road that goes up to the Ranger residence, and then there's a dirt road that connects the Ranger residence to the historic complex, and those will continue to exist for staff patrol access.
And there's also one that goes past the Ranger Road and up to the viewpoint, if I remember. Isn't that a dirt road as well?
That's more an informal, I think an informal road that allows us access to the top and then allows us access to the fire breaks, the fuel breaks that are up in the, up on the knoll.
Okay. And then my last question is, you talk about visibility of the parking, and some kind of berm. Given you're talking about something that's uphill from Alpine Road, what do you guys envision in terms of sort of shielding that?
We'll ask our landscape architect, Paul, to answer that question. Thank you.
Glad I gave you an opportunity to speak.
Hi, I'm Paul Stevenson with CSW SG2, a landscape architect. So you're correct. So the parking would be above the Alpine Road, so that would help minimize the impact. So any berms or grading would be kind of minimal. It'd be, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet higher than the parking area, and it would block the view from the lower portion of Alpine Road. When you were at the intersection of Portola, you'd still see the driveway entrance and some of the cars in the parking area. So it would really depend where you were at and how much you could see the parking lot.
Okay, I guess the reason I'm asking is, as I understood from the diagrams, it looks like the parking area is sort of linearly stretched out, sort of, if you will, parallel to Alpine. So in that sense, potentially maximizing the number of cars you can see. I think of Windy Hill as being perpendicular to Portola Road. And so, you see the beginning of it, but most of the parking is sort of, going away from it. So, I mean, do you feel comfortable with a landscape solution that basically, I don't know, hides is quite the right word, but basically breaks up sort of just having a, you come to that intersection, you look and you say, wow, look, there's 25 cars in a row.
Yeah, no, I am comfortable with a landscape solution blocking or mitigating the view of the cars. I know there are some restrictions. That is the fire break right there. You can kind of see where the right along Alpine Road, it's tilled, so vegetation is restricted with that fire break. But as I said with the berm, I think there could be some grassland where there's not a fire break, and also the berming could restrict the view of the cars, even though it wouldn't be from every vantage point along Alpine Road.
Okay, and maybe the berm can be on the other side of the fire break. I mean, presumably the fire break is mostly to prevent fires starting on Alpine and sweeping into the preserve.
Yeah.
And if the parking were set back enough, then potentially you could still have a berm. I mean, I think I'm just trying to understand how protected the view is, because it is, I mean, Alpine is one of our scenic corridors, so I think that that's an important piece.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. And I don't know how to say it any differently in terms of how much it'll be screened, but I think the landscaping and the grading will screen a fair amount of the parking area from Alpine Road.
Okay, good, thank you.
You done?
Right.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. I am.
Okay. Great. Handful of questions. One is, can you describe the level of analysis that's been done or could be done in terms of compatibility of all of the activities on the same trails? I know in town we've had some concerns about combining equestrian and bikes, and where is that in the discussion? Is that to come? Has it been discussed and assessed?
I think that's to come. We do have multi-use trails throughout the district's properties, so we have some experience with that we'll lean into.
Yeah, it gets a little complicated right along Alpine, and since you're going to need the town's cooperation with that, that has been a running commentary about the safe routes to school and how to make it safe for multiple uses. So it may be that your experience elsewhere we could benefit from, but I would expect questions around that when the appropriate time is. Do we have a process to get them all of our public comments? Is that working, or did that need to be set up, and who should be our point person?
Public comments from tonight or from?
Well, they're asking generally to have access to public comments on that we receive in town. Certainly tonight, there's a couple we can give you, but how can we set this up to work well so that they get relatively real-time access? You don't have to define it now, but maybe I can suggest that you two.
Yeah, I can connect with Ashley and see what we can do
Perfect.
to get you guys the comments you need.
Okay, great. You had a slide showing the general plans outline of the trail. I think it was around slide 36 or so. Out of curiosity, that's an old proposal, right? I think it was probably not. Yeah, it's that orange, yellow. That's old and from an old copy of our general plan, I would assume. Or if not,
It's from the town website.
which is probably quite old, because I don't think, since we haven't had development rights there, we wouldn't have updated in a while. But it does differ quite a lot. I assume the POG discussed that, and, it's just for process with the town. The fact that it is different implicates the general plan. I guess that's a question for you, Catherine. Is that something to put on the to-do list? If the general plan outlines trails in that area and we're contemplating these trails over here.
I think that would be something we would need to look at. I mean, the general
Yeah.
plan is intended to be general, and so a lot of times jurisdictions do specific area plans or close, more detailed planning. Yeah, I think we'd have to look at this to see
Okay.
if we need to.
Okay.
go any greater
And
detail.
I do appreciate we are early in the process, and some of these are going to be we'll answer that in the future. Okay. Parking demand. Has the traffic and the parking factored in an additional 253 units we're required to build over the housing element? And if not, can it be? And are those numbers going to move a dial? Any commentary about what you know or need to look into would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, if you want to come up here, please.
Call for our
Thank you.
transportation engineer. Andrew.
So with regard to the future development, did take a close look at that, and a lot of the proposed development appears to be along Alpine Road and then to the east and northeast. Now, for the purposes of this study, we did existing conditions traffic counts, but we did not do any projections for traffic generated by the site. We did not do a vehicle miles traveled analysis because this is not a traffic study specific to a proposal.
Yeah.
And so under the environmental analysis for CEQA, that's when that study would take place, and we would take the most up-to-date proposals for future development and try to take that into account. So the straight answer is no, because we're in advance of that particular study.
Okay, that's helpful. Because we're required to plan for that. So I assume it will be a factor in stage 4. Something like that. Okay, thank you. And I guess the last part of my questions, it does relate to the segregation of the efforts. And I do appreciate that you're trying to open up to public access earlier wherever possible. At the same time, it's one property, and you guys do this all the times, and I'm no expert. Is segmenting it, or whatever you call it, into 2 different CEQA analysis? Do you know if that's okay? Is that to be done in, like, at the beginning of stage 4 to make that analysis? Because lots riding on the ability to do that.
And call up our planning manager to
Yeah,
answer that.
great, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Haskell. Jane Mark, Planning Manager for Mid-Penn. So as our Senior Planner Tina Hug mentioned, these 2 projects are going on concurrently, but on different timelines. So we are still exploring what type of partnership opportunity could potentially happen at the historic complex. Our board hasn't made any decision on what is going to happen at the historic complex. So at this point, it's quite speculative in terms of what could potentially be done with that one structure that we mentioned, the lower barn. We certainly don't know what will happen for the whole historic complex. So our goal is really to open up this the entire Hawthorne's area minus the historic complex at this point. Our goal is to really to open this area so that the community can come access the trails. At some point, if the timeline for the lower barn, and I don't know if we move ahead with the other structures in the historic complex catch up to our area plan, we will look at it as a whole project to avoid any CEQA segmentation. I mean, that's a very legitimate question. So as a CEQA lead agency, we're going to weigh what our information is that we get to that point.
Okay, and just to clarify, the potential partnership that you know about right now is on the barn, and the others, there's no
We do not have
interest
any,
yet.
no.
Okay.
Yes, the only interest area is on one structure, the lower
Okay.
barn.
Thank you very much. Okay, those are my questions, and it is 9:10. I don't know if anyone wants a 5-minute break. If not, we can keep plugging away and open it up for public comment. We're good? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna first go into the schoolhouse and go through speakers here. I've got 3 speakers. You can also put your hand up, but I'll go through the speaker cards first. The first is Lana Norris.
On, now it's on. Thank you. My name is Lana Norris. I reside in Portola Valley Ranch. I was reassured to hear this evening that everything is in the preliminary stage and there's plenty of opportunity for things to change. So I'm glad that MidPen and the POG are evolving in their thinking. That was also said today. But I am concerned, along with quite a number of other people, about this conservation easement and the fact that there are definitely, in my opinion and a lot of other people's opinion, there are violations, especially regarding the options 9 and 10 for the parking. The report from MidPen's planning department says that the recommendations are aligned with an existing conservation easement. I submit they're not. Tonight, I also heard Ashley say that POG made sure that 9 and 10 complied with the conservation easement. I submit that that's not true. Specific prohibitions, I won't go over them, but you can see them in the easement itself. MidPen has been asked on a number of occasions by different people to explain how their plans comply with the easement. We were not given a response other than to say hear something like Post approves them. I have been in touch with Post repeatedly over the last months, asking them to explain how on earth these prohibitions in the easement can be ignored. What is the authority for saying that 9 and 10 can be where they are? I only got evasive answers. I've communicated with Post, as I said, for months. The last communication was when I asked them specifically to tell me how there was compliance with the easement when specific express prohibitions are being violated. I was told, excuse me, that it's at the property owner's discretion, MidPen's, to how and when to share their plans for property use. So what's happening seems to be that Post says go to MidPen to find out. It seems that MidPen says go to Post to find out. And meanwhile, we haven't found out. Am I limited, by the way, to 30?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. Then I better talk really fast. So MidPen is legally obligated to follow the rules in the easement. Post has no right to waive any of them. I request 2 specific things. One, that MidPen state specifically how options 9 and 10 comply with the easement, with specificity, how. And number 2, that MidPen find another lot location, maybe not for the 50 spaces for this tiny parcel. Ashley said the POG is not fully satisfied with all the other options. Well, things have to be balanced. And I would urge the POG and MidPen to select one of the other options
Okay.
that does not violate the easement.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next is Linda Olson.
Hi, I'm Linda Olson, and I also live at Portola Valley Ranch. I'm very concerned that the Hawthorns is being overdeveloped for this 79-acre mini boutique open space. I'm also concerned that the planned development seems to be piecemeal. For example, the recent addition of the possible development of the barn in the historic complex, this opens up the need to approach the entire project in a holistic and integrated manner. One part impacts the other. I also ask that MidPen be considerate of their neighbors, their concerns, and how development decisions affect them. The Hawthorne project is distinct from other open spaces and is therefore, I believe, should be considered in a different way. It is a unique, small property surrounded by residential and commercial buildings and a neighborhood with trails. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie Crease.
I'm Leslie Crease and I live on Winter Creek in the Ranch, and I want to say thank you for taking the time because I know it's late. I want to tell you a little bit about the ranch and why having this next door is an issue, and why I appreciate the sensitivity to opening up the connections on the part of Mid-Penn. The ranch is significantly different from any other neighborhood in Portola Valley. We're 203 homes, which has got to be a decent percentage of the town. We have a PUD in a form of government. We're a legally dedicated nature preserve, which I'm not sure most people in town understand. And that's based on our formation documents. The way to look at it is when you move into the ranch, you own the little footprint your home is on, because these are not big homes either. And the space surrounding your home is actually owned by the ranch and the 203 homes in the ranch. Those spaces are actually conservation easements, or the larger ones are. So the ranch is sort of, for lack of a better way to put it, riddled with conservation easements. And we can't use those easements, and we need to keep people off of them because of the native species. Ranch homes are tightly clustered in cul-de-sacs, and many of us sit very, very close to the road. Some of you here have seen my home. I'm like on the road. I have a window I can open up and literally hand things to people on the road. But we're targeted very close to the road and close to the trails. This was meant to preserve ranch space. When you move into the ranch, you give up fences, lawns, gardens, pools, yards, terraces, and patios, all to protect the wildlife that live with us. Because of that, the good news is 3/4 of the ranch is undeveloped. Why am I telling you this? Because opening Sweet Springs would be a really difficult situation for us. Many homes and view sheds, especially those near Sweet Springs, will lose their privacy if that is reopened. Many of our homes have lost privacy already because, as you know, we're a Firewise community, and we've been really good about taking down screening plants because they're near your home. And once you have big windows on a trail with no screening, you're your own personal view shed. Many new hikers in the ranch don't understand where they are, and that means they come off of the trails, and that can be damaging to our conservation easements and provide homeowners with a liability issue. I find people in my creek every winter, because it really is a creek I live on, and I pull people out of the creek who are encouraging their children to climb through the creek. What is my liability?
Well, you're
Finally-
beyond the 3 minutes. Are you about to wind down?
Yeah, I was just gonna say we have leash laws, and that's a problem too for
Mhm.
hikers. Anyways, thank you to Mid-Penn for not opening it, and please keep us in mind when you think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go. Anybody else in the schoolhouse? Yes, there's a couple of hands, I think. If you just want to come up and speak into the microphone. Push the button.
Good evening. My name's Duff Sunheim. I'm the Vice President of the Portola Valley Ranch. And in my day job, I'm a federal court mediator, so I'm all about collaboration. I appreciate the spirit of collaboration which was shown tonight and the process that we're going through. I want to focus on one issue that's of concern to us, and that's the fence. As was noted tonight in the great presentation and the maps that were shown, there's a significant segment of the northeast border of the ranch that is shared with the southwest border of the Hawthorns, and that is separated by a fence. Proposals have been made for the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District to obtain the right to develop 2 trails on the Hawthorns and connect those trails to paths at the ranch. However, to get from the Hawthorns to the ranch, you have to go through that fence. And we've consulted an attorney who has told the board that we do not have to give access from the Hawthorns to the ranch. So we want to work with Mid-Penn to determine the basis under which there will be provided access from the Hawthorns to the ranch. There have been some people that have said because there was an easement that was granted to the town almost 50 years ago, that somehow that creates some sort of rights from the Hawthorns to the ranch. And again, we've consulted with our attorneys and there's no basis for that. If they want to get access from the Hawthorns to the ranch, they're going to have to do it through the fence and they're going to need to work with us on the fence. Now tonight, Mid-Penn very clearly articulated that there are no immediate plans to make that connection. However, we would be very much interested in having those discussions with Mid-Penn and the town as to what is the outer parameters of the use. Rather, yes, nothing's going to happen for 3 years, but what is likely to happen down the road? That obviously will affect what we plan to do. It will affect house values. So we'd love to start that discussion now. But again, the key point is there can be no connection between the trails on the Hawthorns with the trails at the ranch without our specific consent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Charles Maroney at Portola Valley Ranch, Coyote Hill. I'm speaking basically tonight to express my concerns, my neighbors' concerns regarding the Hawthorns project. Specifically, I'll focus on the proposed connections, Sweet Springs Trail, to the proposed high-intensity, high-impact use of the property and potentially adjacent properties. The reason I believe this is a high-intensity, high-impact use is the proposal of a 50-car parking lot. Hawthorne, 78 acres, 1.5 miles of trail, is sandwiched between Windy Hill, 1,300 acres, 14 miles of trail, 114 parking spots. The Rostadero Preserve, 622 acres, 10 miles of trails, 40 parking spots. Using the ratios of the parking versus acreage versus trail mileage and comparing these preserves to what the Hawthorns should have for parking suggests that they should have 7 spots, 12 spots, 5 spots, and 6 spots. So 50 spots is going to bring a lot of people. They indicated today that that's because it's going to be a regional area to let people go for many, many miles, mainly up Alpine Road. I'd suggest at this point that if you're going to use Alpine Road, talk to the school. There's paid parking lot there. Nobody's there in the summer. Nobody's there on the weekends. Parking exists. If the 50-car parking lot is built and it's similar to the Rostadero Preserve, you can expect 177,000 visitors per year, or approximately 500 a day. That's what a Rostadero gets. We have a 50-car parking lot. They have a 40-car parking lot. Thirdly, if you look, a 50-car parking lot is full, and let's say half the people come with 2 people, and then there's another 25 people walking or biking to the preserve. So there's 100 people on the trail, 1.5 miles. Basically, there's going to be 1 person every 25 yards. This is striking me as sort of a city park, not really a nature preserve. This leads to concerns about connections to Sweet Springs Trail. We talked about it. It's low use. It's on private property. The ranch developer granted the town an equestrian-only easement in 1975. That's not been changed since that time. The reason for that easement was to make it a low-impact property because the trail weaves through the homes, within 10 yards of homes, looking in people's windows. If you put 500 people a day on the trail, you're going to have a problem. Additionally, funding. Hawthorns, Rostadero, Foothill Park, Windy Hill They have parking lots, people go off in their preserves, they have rangers, they have staff, they pick up garbage.
You're gonna have to wind down.
Got it. We don't have any of that. So if this is a trail that is basically an easement from the town's gonna have to pay for that. That's
Okay.
gonna be substantial. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others in the schoolhouse? I am not seeing any other hands raised here. We'll go online, and the first person is Caroline Vertonghen. Caroline, are you there?
You hear me?
Now we can hear you. Yes.
So I hope you listen to the people from the ranch. I am very disturbed or troubled that we have had the Mayor Wernickehoff to be our representative for the Hawthorns project, and that she recused herself tonight. So I'm addressing the issues to Councilmember Hefty, Mr. Taylor, and Vice Mayor Haskell. I hope you will read the efforts and the input that we have provided to you, not only as residents over the years, but also as members of community and members of PPTS, the Bike, Pedestrian, and Traffic Safety Committee. We are very concerned that the Hawthorns have intentionally presented this project in segments. We are not interested because we have seen the problems that they have caused just with other open space issues that we continue to deal with, and they have not able to help us in Portola Valley. So it is a community effort, and I hope you read the reports, because the Hawthorne project is putting the blame and the finances on our town. We don't have the finances. They don't care. They only care between the fences and the project. They don't care about anything else. And I hope you will listen to the residents and make the right judgment, because what has happened in the past and now is not sustainable and is not acceptable. So thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. The next is Nan Shostak.
Okay, thank you. I am Nan Shostak, I'm a resident in Portola Valley and chair of the town's Geologic Safety Committee. I'm going to quote from footnote 10 of the POG's document submitted to the town council for today's meeting. Begin quote, Hawthorns at Alpine Road has soil types, slope wash and Franciscan complex, ground movement potential, the Barrocal Black Mountain Fault, which coupled with the impacts of climate change point to the import of land use review, end quote. For the past year, the Geologic Safety Committee has been researching the Barrocal and Black Mountain faults. The committee doesn't comment on development projects and will not ever discuss this one. But we would greatly appreciate any information the POG or MidPen has on the Barrocal and the Black Mountain faults at the Hawthorns. Please make any geological or geoengineering reports available to the town and the Geologic Safety Committee as they become available. I know some I know there is already a report out. I apologize if this information is already public, somewhere in the thousands of pages of documents on the project, and I've missed it. Okay, now I'd like to speak for myself as an individual resident, not on behalf of the committee. I agree with two previous speakers. For comprehensive planning purposes for Portola Valley and for MidPen, It would be best to formalize the concept for the entire property, not break it up for piecemeal phasing. I'd like to see the project approached holistically and development plans for the open space, the historic complex, and the lower barn all much better defined before any decisions are made. Thank you.
Thank you, Nan. All right, the next is a phone number ending in 7562. Caroline again? Okay,
No,
Caroline.
I spoke before and I hope you heard my message.
Yes, we did. You're just logged in twice and your hand's up for both, so that's why we called on
Well,
you. But
unfortunately, that is because you have technical problems.
yeah, oh,
If it
no
was
problem.
easy to access, no, if it was easy to access and to give our public comments, then I don't have to access it on two different systems.
No worries, Caroline. That was more just observing. We understand you got to do what you got to do to log in. Right. Next is Karen Askey.
Hi, everybody. As you probably know, I'm on the ad hoc committee for Hawthorns, and I am assuming that you have read all of the letters that came with the agenda packet that came both from our committee as well as BPTS or trails and also open space. So I don't really want to rehash that other than clearly safety, and we have asked for a holistic approach as well. But I just wanted to kind of maybe bring up a couple newer issues. We all have our budget hats on these days. And there will be, or most likely will be, costs to the town associated with this regarding the Alpine Trail upgrade, which I think the town would benefit from, but it doesn't come without a cost. And also, if option 10 is chosen, the intersection at Portola and Alpine Road, that there would be costs there. So I think moving forward, it's really important that we better understand what the town's obligation to this project is financially. That's one of the things. And the other thing that struck me is one of the presenters mentioned that there would be 15 bike parking spots with the parking lot. And now that they're fast tracking or looking at fast tracking the historic barn on the Los Trancos side and having parking over there, I'm wondering if looking at having bicycle parking on that side would be an option. And obviously a cost benefit analysis has to be done, but I wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Christy Corley. Christy, you're on mute, it looks.
Oh, thank you. Portola Valley is a priority conservation area. So I do have a few questions. Has a reptile study been done on the hawthorns, and when and if this would take place? As you know, the San Francisco garter snake is on the list, and I'm wondering if you've been able to study that. I brought it up before. You did not mention the horse usage or horse parking area, and I'm wondering your plans on that as well. I know you're planning to put the parking lot 60 feet in instead of 75 feet in. So that is a concern of mine because I've had to place things 75 feet back, and I think we all should be going under the same rules. The 4,500 square foot barn should be for all children in San Mateo County and Santa Clara Valley and the whole peninsula, not a certain group, in my opinion. And we obviously share priorities and we also have different priorities. I think our first priority is safety of ingress and egress for our pedestrian and bikers. And I feel that the Alpine Trail should be in phase one and go along and be negotiated with our town with the planning of the driveway and the parking lot and the bathroom, the Alpine Trail is an intricate part of this town and it has to be planned with your parking lot. So I don't know how that can be spun off for another phase. So I hope you'll consider that. And then there's a CK accident report from 2/7/24 presented to BPTS. It was sent to you on 9/17/24, and it has to be reviewed by the town council as well, because that shows they were quite surprised as to the accidents on our two main roads. And that has to be taken into consideration. So I know that we all care about natural resources and we all care about safety. I do believe the parking lot number 10, if you can see Alpine Road and you can see Roberts parking lot, the overflow is going over there. And so wouldn't it be best to possibly put the parking lot elsewhere so the overflow doesn't go onto our main roads? I think where the tour parking was perfect, and that is a sacrifice that MROSD might have to make, is putting it close to the meadows, but then we also don't have the overflow that we're extremely worried about. And we haven't seen reconciliation by MROSD for Windy Hill overflow on Willowbrook and Portola Road. So once you build it, we don't see the help. And we do have a financial problem right now. So we need your help with Alpine Trail.
Okay,
and
Christy, you
Alpine
gotta
Road.
wind
Thank
down.
you. Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Bye.
Okay, all right. All right, I'll give it one more minute or a couple more seconds for others. There's no more hands up online that I see. Okay, no more in the schoolhouse, no more online. Let's bring it back for comment and discussion. Jeff, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, thank you for presenting. It's good to see this project moving forward. We've, I don't remember when the Hawthorns was first given to Post. It's been at least 10 years, I believe.
2011, they said.
Yeah, that's 13 years. Okay. I generally support the approach you're taking. There are some, you know, I mean, I'm not crazy about seeing the parking lot go in on where you're proposing it on site 10, but I understand it does just logistically feel like the best, probably the best place to put it. You know, I love the idea of connecting to the trails, including Sweet Springs. I understand the concerns about it. So I don't know how, I have no idea how the easement's going to work. I would generally support that. Other than that, I don't think I have any really specific comments. I just look forward to seeing this work continue. Thank you.
Thanks. Mary, you want to go?
The main comment is to congratulate you guys for the most comprehensive possible effort at reaching out to community and talking to everybody and getting all different levels of involvement from the town and from the community. I mean, it's really, we've all been studying to see how you do this and hoping to incorporate some of your good outreach. So that's the main thing I had to say. In addition, I'm afraid that I'm a believer that we have to do both at the same time. And the main reason why I'm doing that is that one thing I didn't really see was the sphere of influence map, that the town sphere of influence map. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see the big blow up of where this fits in with both our plan sphere of influence for trails and how it does fit in with our larger wildlife corridor issues, which are getting to be more and more every minute. And that really, the great thing about doing this project has been that it's the heart of, it's the connection. It is the connection between Jasper Ridge and between Blue Oaks and between Windy Hill. It's the heart of that ecosystem, if you will. And without this corridor and have it be respectfully done, we're really missing a lot. So looking at our trail sphere of influence map will at least give you that idea where people flow and where animals flow with the trails, because they do. As we all know, as we've mentioned, Helen and I, the Arastradero connection and the whole wildlife corridor that connects this lot to Arastradero is just as important as the Blue Oaks connection as it is to the ranch connection. Those are all interconnected, and it's important that we look at that all at once. And of course, the main ventricle is the historic complex of this heart, if you wish it to be. And because that's where the Blue Oaks and Arastradero and Los Trancos, all those corridors intersect right there in the middle of the historic complex. So doing this without having that in place is putting the cart before the horse. But also, and the last point I wanted to make was that the town itself is committed that all developments put their trails in first before they do start parceling out their obligations throughout the development plot. For example, and I certainly, because I love Amorosti and I always want to do whatever Post wants, and I try my very best to be a cooperative member in that society. It's just that we unfortunately are dealing with you as a developer now. You have a development there at the historic complex. And so we would expect you, like any other developer, to put in the trails through that complex and have that clearly before any kind of negotiation was underway with anybody, be they ever so much part of the fabric of our town. So that's my plea to you. I know it might sound like I'm trying to slow you down, but you guys are good at that. You're good at the long run. So thank you very much.
Craig?
So I wanted to thank you, and I appreciate the level of collaboration that you guys are sort of using as you work through this process. The focuses I'd like to see, just to keep this short since it's getting late, is really understanding kind of the wildlife corridor sort of in and through the property, to make sure that we not only continue the movement of wildlife, but maybe enhance it. The connections to other trails and open spaces, I think, is pretty critical. It's a small open space, and I think unless it goes someplace, I'm not sure how interesting it is just to go and do a short loop. I mean, that somebody said maybe it just becomes a local park, like a little community park. The visibility of parking I mentioned earlier. I just think the important thing is if you're going to put a parking lot right above Alpine, it should be screened. I mean, I think the one at Windy Hill is a good example of that. You hardly notice that it's there. And I would hope that the parking at Alpine would be similar. And then finally, given the size and given maybe as this project moves forward and you work more of the details out, but given the lack of connections and given the size of the parking, 50 cars seems excessive to me. I'm not sure how we're justifying 50 cars for, what was it, 1.5 miles of trails? So, it seems to me either the plan needs to be strengthened to sort of justify the 50 cars, or maybe you reduce the number of cars. But again, I really do appreciate the spirit of cooperation that you guys bring this to us in. So thank you.
Great. So I did attend as an alternate one of your meetings, and it was about midway through your process. And it was extremely impressive how you took incredibly malleable concepts and tried to balance them out and made sure people had ways of weighing in about their concerns. It clearly changed. So I appreciate that you heard the concerns, you're adjusting, you are trying to strike the right balance and, reading between the lines, you're still working on that, but this is ready based on your standard process for next steps. So we always like to support the open space efforts, and everybody regionally and locally enjoys the open space. When I was on the Trails Committee, I was looking forward to the opportunity to do something that made more sense about Alpine Trail. And, among other benefits that will be notable to our town. The comments that I have for you, it's a hard process because you start down one path, you're adjusting. So I know it's not linear and it can't be. So take what I'm saying more directionally on things that I would recommend you pay attention to and have plans for. It seems some of this might be better done earlier than later, but I'm going to defer to your process. So first, some of the legal analysis about easements, it's mounting up to be something that might impact the details of the placement of the trails, the connectivity of the trails. And I think those are very important to understand. And, I have an appreciation. I don't live that far away from some of these trails that are being mentioned for connectivity. And there are things to be, you're striking a balance between wildlife corridors and making sure there's that access and public access, and adding the trails that you've decided to defer, to me, would require a fair amount of consultation and discussion in 3 years. I anticipate that will may or may not make sense, and I'm glad the PAWG made the recommendation to defer that until we know more about the popularity, the trends and visitation, things like that. But I think if and when that comes up, it's going to be very important to have a crisp analysis of that balance and what's driving it, as well as the easements that are being raised. All right, then more generally, some of the connections you want with your other open spaces seem tenuous right now. So planning parking numbers on the ability to connect doesn't seem quite in the right balance yet. To Craig's point, I think 50 seems a lot. And that is going to be, every single car is going to be impacting the visual corridor. So I would pressure test that as you do in your normal process. I have some concerns about multi-use and safety. I know you have a lot of experience, and, we would benefit from that. We can learn from your experience, but also we have a lot of history about what's worked and where some of the glitches have been. So hopefully there's a two-way dialogue about that. And it's no surprise that we have cost consciousness on our minds, and we will for the foreseeable future. So anything that impacts the ability of the town to control its costs is going to be something, if it's central to the planning, raised earlier rather than later. I'm not saying when, it's just sooner rather than later for anything that impacts our costs. If it's but for your plans, it's going to be important to put out there. There's been some reference to spending on Alpine Trail. There's potential other support that I can anticipate, permits being needed. And so permits are one thing, but actual expenditures by the town are going to have a different level from my point of view of import. Both are important, but the cost consciousness is here for the next several years, I think. I think that's it for me. Anybody have anything else? Yes.
I just wanted to add one thing I meant to state originally. I would like you to look at the evacuation potential. I mean, that given our current housing plan, Alpine is a significant has a significant number of new, potentially new housing being developed on Alpine. And if that's going to require doing a road upgrade, that's potentially a big significant cost for everybody involved. So I think as we sort of move this forward, that's going to be important as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and that related is the 253 units. I know that's going to come in a later stage. So just, we're going to be paying a lot of attention to that because it's going to feed into a couple of the town priorities in the next few years. I'm gonna, and if there are any disconnects and you're getting information, just reach out. I mean, I'd be happy to be a point person as a backup if there is a need to give us information or to make sure residents get you information that or commentary. Just want to facilitate that as much as I can. So that's on a personal level. Feel free to use me. Anything else? I think that covers. Did you get what you need? Do you have any particular comments that you want us to clarify?
I don't. Any, Midpen? No, we're good.
Thank you so much. And I know how late it is. We really appreciate your patience and yet this is an important moment. It's the first time the town council has had the chance to have this. So thank you very much. Really, really nicely done.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Well, thank you all.